We're really excited today. For those of you who are here in the fall for Will Collins' session, Drift down in Boston has become a company to watch, not only in Boston, but kind of in tech and in marketing, in the B2B marketing space and period. And we're really excited. Please join me today in welcoming David Cancel from Drift. He's the CEO and co-founder, so thank you.
Say my name right.
I have seen the video where you explain the story.
About my name?
About the Boston
no one ever
butchering
says.
of your name.
Cancel.
So, just on that note, I'd love to before we talk a little bit more deeply about Drift, hear a little bit more about your background, your story. Yep. You've had a pretty interesting kind of career progression, entrepreneurship focused.
Yep.
Just a little bit more about you and that story.
So, as you said, my name is David Cancel. Yes. I grew up in Queens, New York. So start there. I was born in the Bronx and grew up in Queens, New York. And my parents emigrated to the U.S. My dad from Puerto Rico, so my name is Cancel, and my mom from Ecuador. And then, and I always had this. They both worked for themselves, which sounds more glamorous than it is. And so I grew up in this household of everyone working 7 days a week and working on their own. And so that was my normal. Right, that was my context, and but I always had this idea that I wanted to start a business, but I didn't know what starting a business meant or what a business was, and I didn't know any of that. And my mom's only dream for me was for me to be an accountant, which I failed miserably at. And but I don't think for her an accountant meant that I would wear a suit and have a briefcase and have a secure job. So I did the exact opposite, and I kind of stumbled on the early internet and became obsessed with it. I studied computer science and accounting in college and didn't like any of it at all. I wasn't that interested in it, but I spent my days all day, morning and night in the library because we had early commercial internet access and we had Mosaic and then Netscape, and that's all I did all day. And so that led me onto this never-ending rabbit hole, which is the internet, and wanting to start companies. And along the way, I joined kind of three people in New York and Manhattan at the early kind of dawn of commercial internet, like '96, and we created three companies, and they all spun out and got sold and what have you. And then I moved up to Boston, followed my girlfriend, now wife, for many years. I had never been to Boston, and moved to Boston, and I've started 5 companies. The 5th is Drift now. The other 4 companies I sold the last one, Performable, to HubSpot, and then I was when we were like 200 people at HubSpot, and then was chief product officer through going public, and then left there to start Drift.
Great. And I think that entrepreneurship side of things is something that's increasingly interesting to MBAs.
Yeah.
Right?
It wasn't before.
It wasn't before,
yeah.
Right? Can you talk a little bit about that? How do you kind of feed that entrepreneurial side of yourself? Once you started a company, trying to grow it, where is it for you that you get the most of that impact and value and kind of fulfillment?
Sure. On the first part of that, it's kind of surreal because entrepreneurship, I swear, was not a word that I even knew until halfway through my career. It wasn't a word that people would use, really. It kind of I always say entrepreneur. When I was the first 10 years of my career meant you couldn't get a job. That was code, could not get a job. I'm an entrepreneur. It's you're unemployable, right? So it was, and it was really until later, it's really post Zuckerberg era that it became kind of popular. So it's always strange to me to use that word because it was a word that we never used. For me, I knew I wanted to start businesses. I didn't really know what that was, but I have an obsessive, really addictive personality, and my addiction has been the same. It's been learning, and so I've been obsessed with learning and learning new things. And learning those new things and problems and markets always end up becoming a company. So every one of the companies has been I've started with some problem, something that I'm obsessed about, and the outcome is a company that comes out of it. I've never approached it as I want to start a company. What should the company be? Let's ideate on some ideas. I've never started it that way. And actually, the more time that goes on, the more against kind of ideas. I don't like the idea-based entrepreneur, and I meet most of them are those, because I was kind of like that early in my career, and I think that becomes an obsession around creating this idea, and you only care about creating your idea, and then that causes you to shut down and not hear feedback from the market or hear feedback about the product or what you're trying to do. You just want to create this idea, right? And that becomes dangerous. And for me, it's been more about learning and customer problems, markets, changes in markets, and problems we're trying to solve. And who cares what the idea is, because the reality is it's going to be a radically different idea. You know, I always say, like, I've met many thousands of entrepreneurs throughout my career, and the story of, like, I had an idea in a shower and that became a multi-billion-dollar company I've never come across that in reality one time. Like, that's a great Hollywood story, but like the truth is that everything has iterated and changed and moved, which should be no surprise, because, like, I think the creation process, all creation process follows that same path, right? So, like I always say, like, you know, in the sciences, we know about the feedback loop and we know about testing, right? And in the arts, we know that you have to iterate on it, and the first paragraph is never the bestseller, and the first line on a piece of paper is not the end drawing, right? It's a painful work of iteration and exploration. And so, but in technology, we have some insane thought that we're going to have an idea in a shower, and then that's the idea, and that's it. And so it's never been that case. I think creation process is always the same.
So let's talk about Drift's solution to a problem that exists. Like, maybe we start with the problem.
Yeah.
The problem that Drift is trying to address. Like, what is that problem really?
Yeah. So our problem is that we focus on is that the way that people buy. It's all obvious, right? But the way that people buy is radically changed in the last 5 years, really the last decade, largely fueled by the phone and globalization and new kind of buying paradigms coming in from a consumer standpoint. So it's a totally different world. So, like, we now live in a world where, like, for most things we can buy everything on demand, or we can order them ahead, or, like, everything is accessible to us. And at the same time, all of these populations have come online, and everyone expects, and everyone has access to kind of endless supply in every single category that there is, like this insane commoditization. So all of a sudden, what that means is that you've moved from a company-controlled world to a customer-controlled world. And so we think that's the massive paradigm that we're riding on. And in our world, which is largely B2B, no one has woken up to that yet, of, like, well, you no longer are in a world where you have only 1, 2, or 3 competitors. You're competing with companies all over the world, and they can replicate and copy everything that you do instantaneously. And so how do you actually buy in that world? And so our thing, to answer this in a long way, is, like, because of this shift, we've just inverted, and what we've done is we've said everything in our market, in our world today, is built to help companies sell more. And Drift is inverted that and says we focus on the buyer, and we focus on helping the buyer buy more easily, which is solving the same thing, but it radically changes your perspective to, like, what you focus on, and we think that's important because of this shift that's happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we talk a little bit about what that looks like from a product perspective.
Sure.
So, you know, you have some really great explanations on your website. If you haven't been to the Drift site, go see it. Check out their blog. Check out the podcast. Right. But there's a lot of really great content. But, you know, chatbots is something that I think we hear a lot, but I think a lot of folks are still struggling to really wrap their head around what a chatbot is and sort of how it plays into this new way of buying. Yeah,
so when we started out on this journey of, like, all right, so if we're going to focus on the customer and this new way of buying, like, how do I buy everything else? Well, everything else is, like, available 24/7 and 365, and it's on my terms. But nothing in selling businesses, buying from businesses, works that way. That works on 9 to 5. We get back to you when we want to get back to you, and fill out this form and download this ebook, and we'll get back to you in 3 weeks, right? Like, that's the world. So we said, how do we change this? And we said, how do we create this, what we all message all day? Like, we look around, like, that is what has become normal. And so we started with messaging. And, you know, my thought was, like, look, I've been using messaging for 25 years at least, and so nothing is new technically, like, it all existed. What's different is, because of penetration, again, of the smartphone in new markets in the world, like, we've gone from a world where messaging was used by, you know, like, a million geeks like myself talking to each other, to, like, it is normal, right, around the world. And not only normal, but it is, like, the default for most people on the way that they communicate. They rather text you than call you, right? Like as everyone here will tell you.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Seeing a few smiles.
Yeah, right. So like it became normal. So that was the first observation. So we said, if we could use messaging, forget the way we buy today. If we could use messaging to take someone who goes to a website, which we think about it's effectively your store, right? They walk into your store, and how do we connect that person to someone immediately, 24/7, 365, to answer their question and to help them during the buying process? And so that was the first observation. The second thing was like, well, these people are not online, meaning the people in the company, so how are we going to deal with this? And so we said, let's trying a bot, and I will disclose that I hate bots. Like at the time, I hated all bots because most bots were like, the main problem I had with them was that they were still crude. They were still trying to find a solution, most of the ones that I saw, and they were trying to fake human interaction. They were trying to convince you as a human, right? And so like, this is Lisa, or this is like Amy, or this is whatever. And it's like, as soon as you set that expectation, as soon as something is slightly off, because then you're like, I'm never going to use this.
It
this
just kind
is
of
like,
pauses
yeah.
and sits there and waits for a while.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's not a human behavior. So we said, what about if we used a bot and we designed it around a pattern that said, this is a bot. We will always tell you it's a bot, and we reset the expectation from the beginning. So we thought like maybe it's more like IVR, which is like, your phone systems where you call in. But like if we reset the expectation, we lowered the expectation, maybe people, because we're all selfish, we'll use it because it's a faster path to their answer. That was the bet. And then and so that's how we launched. We launched with messaging, and then bots who could answer questions for people 24/7, but also qualify them from a sales standpoint in real time and make decisions on real time that said, like, if they're qualified and there happens to be a salesperson somewhere in the world that they should talk to, that it would figure out how to route it to them in real time, which is actually the difficult part, qualify and route them in real time, and the salesperson would not know anything about Drift or anything. They would just get pinged on their phone like a text message and says, there's, Patrick is here and he's from Tuck and blah, 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 and do you want to talk to him now? And just click on that, and all of a sudden they're conversing, right? And then for the salesperson, it was also selfish because they were like, I don't have to do any work. Like, I just get like this thing, and then I just click, and then it's there. Yeah.
Removing all of that up front.
All
and
of
the
friction.
scheduling seems to be another part.
Yeah, and
the
flip part of it was, if we decided it should go to David, the salesperson, and David was asleep, we would just offer up David's calendar and tell the customer, hey, you choose when and how you want David to get back to you. Again, moving the power to the customer. And then as soon as we did that, we saw that for us, it worked immediately. Like when we launched it internally, and we weren't sure about it, we had one person who was kind of a pseudo salesperson, and he walked in the next day. We launched it on our website, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And he walked in the next day, and he was like, holy bleep, 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 bleep. And we were like, what happened? We were like 5 people. Like, what happened? And he said, my entire calendar has demo calls scheduled for the entire week, and I didn't do anything. And he was like, this is bleeping magic. And we were like, what? And then, but of course, we were like, oh, it must be broken. Like maybe it's like the same meeting like 20 times or something. Yeah, something's broken here. And so we went through all of them, and we were like, oh no, this is real. These are all real, right? And it was like immediate, like we knew that we were onto something real there. And then we started to work with customers, and they had the same experience or even better experience. And then we knew like, oh, okay, this is working, and it's going to help people, those companies sell more, even though the focus is on helping the customer buy, right?
So, you alluded to it, but you now have over 150,000
businesses,
businesses using Drift.
Like,
you've grown really rapidly. Can you talk a little bit about that growth and what some of the, what has that meant for the company? What are some of the challenges that you faced as well?
Yeah, lots of. So we, for a lot of the, for most of our history,
right?
None, easy, very easy.
Deposit in the bank.
Yeah, no, I think like all problems are people problems. That's so like, there's like, I used to think that like most of the problems were like go to market, strategy, technology, blah, 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 insert whatever you want to talk, whatever interesting thing you want to talk about. And now I've concluded that those are if you sum all those, that's like 1% of the problem, and 99% of the problem is people, right? And those are people inside your company and your customers and your market and your investors and your whatever, and getting all those dynamics right, that's hard. This is like nice and easy, and it's great, and we can geek out on it, and it's fun. But this is very. I wish it was just this. I wish it was just the 1%, and there were no people involved. This would be amazing. It would just be great.
So is that how you spend your day then? Mainly is focusing on those people problems?
Yeah, because we've grown from like most of our history. We've been around 4 years, so like half the history we're like whatever 20 something people, you know, and then last year we went from like 80 to 260 people, and then we went from one office to three office here, Boston, San Francisco, and Seattle, and then this year we're 260, and we'll end like at 500 people this year, and so that's a lot of problems, right?
That's
a lot of people, a lot of problems.
Kind of growth.
Yeah, and then we'll open an office in EMEA, and we'll open some other offices. So like all of that is our problems. The other problem is that just from a market standpoint, we're in the middle of that crossing the chasm of like we've gone from those early adopters, we've now are in the bigger companies, if you want to call them early majority or whatever, but we're in that beginnings, and that's a whole different thing. Now we're working with massive, global companies and tens of thousands of people and stuff like that. So as well as very small customers, and so we're serving all of those different parts of the market. So that becomes hard. So I spend most of my time on building systems. We've become obsessed with systems. We call them building engines. We call it engines in here. Amazon calls them mechanisms, and Bridgewater calls them machines. Like everyone has it. So like we're trying to create these like systems internally, and so I have like 15 books on systems thinking on my table right now, and we're just trying to teach them. And we have hired ex-Bridgewater people who worked on building machines to help us develop systems as well. So we spend a lot of time on people, system design, how do we build engines, how do we not only build an engine, which can be around anything, it doesn't have to be around technology, and how do we gain insights out of that? Because again, the core that we built the company around is around the feedback loop. So the key output is learnings. Right? Everything is learnings. How do we put something in? How do we experiment? How do we measure it? How do we get a learning out of it? We call it an insight. But if there's no insight that comes out of it, even though the metrics are going in the right way, there's a failure. We have to learn something from it. Yeah. So
you've spent a lot of time working in the sales and marketing kind of space your whole career, right? You got your company and your team has some pretty interesting kind of marketing approaches for selling Drift. Can you talk a little bit about that and the way that you use video and kind of personalization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So we, along the way, like creating Drift, we thought that Drift should be part of this bigger category, which we didn't have a name for. We then called it conversational marketing, and then I hated the name when we came up with it. We had many names. It was the least offensive of them, and conversational marketing, because I was like, I don't think people can spell conversational. Like it's too like long. And but we settled on it, and we started using it. And then we woke up like a year later and realized that other people were using it, and then Gartner was contacting us, and Forrester and Sirius Decisions and a bunch of other analysts, and they were all using it, and we were like, oh, it's a category now. It's a real category. And so we wrote a book on it, which we just released with Wiley less than a month ago now.
Really
yeah. And it's off to a good start. We've sold just around 10,000 copies of that book, and so that's one part of marketing. But we've always had this. We have a free book called This Won't Scale, like all real lessons of marketing lessons. You can get it from our website, and we'll ship you a copy of the book for free. But my idea was like that we have to again invert and rethink how we want to market. Like if we were going to come into marketing and use the same marketing techniques that everyone else used, it was never going to work for us. In marketing and sales SaaS, there are at least 8,000 companies right now, and that keeps accelerating, so we would never stand out. So we went back to basics and said, how do we stand out? It's all about, again, conversations and communication. And so we started to study copywriting. I was obsessed with copywriting, and copywriting mostly from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And so because my thought was I started to look at it and think this was the most amazing thing, right? We had lost the art of communication because we had become in the last 10 to 15 years, the way I describe it is look, no one has sold anything without a conversation for all of time. Like you can go back to history a long time. But we've had like a 10 to 15 year gap in the history where we become so obsessed around measuring everything that we manage everything through proxy, and we've lost the ability to like communicate, right? And so we're going back to like original times. So study copywriting, I became obsessed with it because I was thinking like, look at this, these examples are amazing if you look at old copywriting, because back then someone could sell you something in the back of a magazine or catalog that you had never seen before, that you had to like mail a check for and hope that some product came. And they were able to sell these things. Like, what kind of copywriting is this? And it was an ad that was this big. Like, what kind of writing was this? And so we studied that stuff, and we trained ourselves on copywriting and communication. And then we did a bunch of every technique that was out there. We would go the opposite way of like going. Like conferences, we were never going to sponsor a conference. We were never going to have a booth. Like, we would take over other people's conferences, and so we would take over other people's conferences and be like, oh, we're gonna do the Drift 5K at XYZ conference. And so all of a sudden we would have a 5K the morning of someone else's conference. We were not involved in the conference. And we saw right away, like we would build these human connections, and all the people who would attend spent all day talking to each other and about the Drift 5K. Like we had taken over the mind share of them, and then we would have like spin class, like soul cycle classes for free drift at this conference, or Barry's boot camp, or like whatever. We did all these kind of crazy things, billboards, trains, this, that, whatever thing that people said didn't work, we would do those things. And the reason why, to kind of summarize, is my thought, marketing is like, when you, from a demand gen standpoint, is like you're just chasing arbitrage, right? Like it's arbitrage, right? Like, which people don't understand for some reason. And it's so, where are there arbitrage opportunities? They're usually in new channels that no one has exploited yet, or things that are hard to measure, and/or, right? It could be that combination. If it's hard to measure it, or if it's subscale or new, no one's really investing in there because it's not provable yet. So that's where there's lots of arbitrage opportunity. Just like if you were an early advertiser on Google, when it was hard and no one could figure it out, that's when the arbitrage was there. The same with Facebook, same with every other channel. As soon as it becomes scalable, easy to measure, the arbitrage gets taken out of that system. It becomes really expensive. And so we spend our time chasing things that are not perfectly measurable or subscale, and those are where the opportunities are. So we've done no end to crazy things, like we'll ship you free books anywhere in the world. We'll ship you, I'm not wearing right now, but I'm wearing this, hoodies, hats, this. We have Drift sneakers. We have Drift joggers. Anyone want Drift joggers? Let me know. And anyone who asks, we'll ship it anywhere in the world with no expectation on that, because we're trying to build a global brand. We're not trying to build a software brand. We're not trying to build a global software brand or a Boston brand. Like, we think part of what we're trying to do is, in this new world of SaaS, like, you have to build a global brand if you were to dominate. Because, not that you asked, but like I think we're in this third phase of SaaS. I've gone through I've classified like these phases of SaaS that I've lived through. First phase of SaaS was early Salesforce, NetSuite, et cetera, et cetera. Like, really, you had like 1 or 2, 3 competitors, and they were mostly with a different technology stack, i.e. on-prem versus cloud. And so like when I was building companies back there, you could hide behind technology patents, you could hide behind trade secrets, you could hide behind the fact that technology moats, the fact that no one could replicate the thing that you built. But then we went into the second phase, and that's when Zendesk and when I was at HubSpot and other companies, where it was like technology was no longer a moat, but what was a moat was business models were a moat, because no one really knew how you did inside sales. No one knew what LTV was. No one knew what CAC was. No one knew what payback periods were. No one knew like freemium versus, like no one knew the mechanics or how you measure it. Even those first several companies going public, no one really knew how to understand them. And then all of a sudden now, because of all the great content online, like everyone knows that. So there's no more moats there. Right. Therefore, in SaaS now, in any given category, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of alternatives. And so we're in the third phase of SaaS, which is more like, I call it the Procter & Gamble phase. Like, now we have to figure out, how do we build like brand affinity? How do we stand out? How do we become number one in whatever your niche is?
So can we talk, one of the concepts is the end of software. Can we talk a little bit about that concept then?
Sure.
And share a little bit of what your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I have no share of
For a lot of, I'm sure for a lot of
tangents.
students are like, I don't know what that is. What do you mean? I thought we're in the golden age and software is eating the world.
No, we're
Right?
the end of software. Software's dead. What I mean by that is like, no, software is actually, is everything. Therefore, software has no, like there's very little marginal value in software, right? So like, again, back to the first generation of SaaS, there was a lot of value in software because no one could replicate it. Now everyone can replicate it, which is great. That means it's in everything and it's part of our lives. That means software by itself has very little value, right? Because you can replicate it. And so I think, the way I think about it is like what we need to build, what people care about now is our experiences. Like an experience is what we will pay extra for. It was why I paid extra for Starbucks, which I had a second ago, than something else, because it's an experience, right? It's something that I'm paying more for than something else. And I think people no longer are become numb to software, like no longer care about software. I always use the examples of like, what is Uber? Is Uber software? I don't know. Is it people? I don't know. What is it? I don't know. Just like a car comes, like when I order it. I don't know what should I think about that as a consumer as? When I use Google and I search for something, do I care that those results came back because it was an algorithm, it was AI, or it was a combination of all three and the 3,000 people that they have in the Philippines that hands fix the index every day?
Right.
Like, I don't know. I don't care. And if they got rid of the 3,000 people and it became all AI or it became all people and no AI, I have no opinion. I don't care.
As long as the outcome's there.
As long as the outcome is there. Same thing with Facebook. Like every ad goes through another 3,000 or 4,000 people. Like, I don't really care about those things. I care about like what was the experience and what was the outcome that I got. And so my thing and everything that we're building is like we shouldn't think about it as software that we're building. Obviously we build software today, but like it can be anything. These are solutions to problems that we're building.
Yeah, coming back to that, it's not about the idea, it's about the solution to the problem and understanding your customer.
Exactly. And then that customer, if we gave them an amazing solution and it was people-based or software-based or AI-based or I don't know, something else based, like, or combination-based, they shouldn't care. And I think, one of the things that we're unlearning in the market today is that for so long in venture-backed SaaS, like, we had all of our investors telling us that we couldn't have services, you couldn't have professional services, you couldn't have people, you couldn't have this, you couldn't have that, because you only get one-time multiples on those, and you want software margins and software. So we were, again, that was in a world where the company had all the control, all these companies had control, and so they could force their customers to go through these crappy experiences, because like we didn't want to give you services. You got to figure it out on your own. Read the help docs on your own. Figure it out. Do it yourself. Sorry,
DIY.
DIY. Sorry. And then but I came out of that experience saying like we made so many customers suffer and so many customers unsuccessful because we were running the business based on our margin preference. And the customer actually in this new world doesn't care about what your margin makeup is like. They just care about like what the outcome is.
So how do you push back against the VCs, right? Because they're writing the check, right? They're funding you. What role have you seen? I mean, you've started a number of companies, right? How has that changed? What have you learned on that side of defending the customer from the kind of parameters?
Yeah.
Not that all VCs are bad, right? It's not.
I'd say.
Lindsay's looking at me.
Yeah.
Spent her summer at a VC firm.
I'd say, well, the first thing is that it's kind of like, first thing I learned is like, well, I've been doing it long enough, so like I'm kind of on the other side now, so it's a little unfair, and so it's easier for me now. Part of that is, the big learning is, in life is like if you need no money, that's when you get all the money, right? When you need money, there's no money, right? That's the law. And so like in early days of like starting to raise money, when I needed money, it was very hard to get money. Starting Drift, we didn't need any money, so therefore money was very easy and free. So that's, I don't know what you can learn from that, but that's an observation.
Puts you in a strong position.
Yeah, strong position. I'd say for the right investors, now I think they understand it because they've,
seen seen the cycle
they've seen the cycle now,
yeah.
and so they understand it. They've seen enough cycles now where they understand like the differentiation is not just software, and that these are reoccurring businesses. Like every business is becoming a reoccurring base or subscription-based business. Like, and therefore, like if you want this long lifetime value and this long value of the customer, like you're gonna have to provide these experiences. And I think part of it for the investors too is because they're just consumers like the rest of us, and so we're experiencing this in our lives every second. And so like it's becoming clear that everything else is being commoditized except the experience.
And to the kind of point that you made about drift, that line between what is B2C and what is B2B and what it looks like is kind of being erased.
Yeah, it's totally being erased. I mean, the B2B, like there's still humans buying, and those humans have expectations, and as generations change and expectations change, like they drag those expectations with them. The other thing so we started drift on all of these kind of like mega trends that I say. Like one of them was this movement from the company having control to the customer. That's the biggest one, having control. The other was this rise in messaging. The other was this idea that we talked about for many years, which was like the consumerization of the enterprise, right? Or that people within the company in the enterprise could buy software outside of procurement, outside of siloed centers, was going to become true. Guess what? It's true now. And in every company that I go to, including ours, like nobody knows. CFO does not know what gets bought. Yeah. Right. Our CFO does not know what gets bought until afterwards. Everyone is buying. Yeah. What does that mean? That means that, and the reason that's important for us is that means that all of a sudden you have all these people who are not professional buyers, who are just consumers making buying decisions within the company, and their expectation is that this is going to work, just like buying anything in their normal lives. They're not going to be like the rest of us who have grown up with buying in this very weird
procurement process.
Yeah, process.
Yeah. It's a process, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where no one loves process.
No.
There are a few.
There are a few
that really love it. They really love it.
Really love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in this kind of new world, one of the concepts that we talk a lot about in the center and here at Tuck is the idea of trust, and how that's changing. You've been a pretty vocal kind of person on the what is trust even? What does that mean to you? What does that mean to Drift? And how do you kind of differentiate? How do you think about trust with your consumers and with your employees? Yeah.
I mean, trust is the bigger part of the experience for us, right? First, before you can have the experience, you need some level of trust, and the greater the trust that you have, the more time you have to build that experience and to have a deeper experience with someone. And so for us, trust is the thing that we talk about all the time, along with the experience and that mattering. And that's why for us, it's not about, are they a lead, are they a prospect, are they a customer, are they whatever. They're just a person, and if they're interested in us and they want to book or this or that, or they want to talk, or they just want to have a chat, we treat all of those people like we want to be treated, like a person, right? And that, sadly, I will say that has been one of our secrets from a marketing standpoint, because that blows people away in our world, right? That they'd be like, oh, you actually responded. And they're like, I'm like, yeah, you sent me you DM'd me.
You asked, and
yeah, so like I responded to it, and they're like, this is weird, this is bizarre.
How do we get there though? Because that wasn't always the case, and I think trust has really taken a hit, and in large part, a lot of technology companies have been
for sure
at the front of destroying trust. Can you talk about how we got there, or what your thoughts are there, and how do you maintain a company that prioritizes trust?
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of times where doing the thing that hurts trust is profitable.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
We've learned it's very profitable.
Many times. Yeah, most of the time. I'd say that the quickest way there is going to be through all of the pain and failure, right? Pain is our greatest teacher, and so like we are living through the beginnings of some of that pain right now, and that will teach us collectively where to prioritize. I don't see an easy way to teach this. So we got to learn through pain. We also, I think, because of the shift from the company to the consumer, like we actually are learning pretty quickly that we have no choice. Right. Like there's no choice. There's no alternative, right? Unless you are one of the few companies left still who have a monopoly on a certain type of market, which is becoming increasingly rare. You have no choice but to rely on trust, right? And so as monopolies start to fall and this kind of global competition increases, we're going to have nothing but the ability to gain trust and to build experiences around that trust as the only thing that we sell. I really think that's all we're going to sell, right? And so we've modeled ourselves, even though we're a software company, from day one on, like, we've been obsessed with the 4 seasons. Like, we use that as a model, like 4 seasons experience, like everything that they do in terms of, like, not only training, but how do you, like, greet someone in a certain way? How do you talk to someone? How do you treat someone like that? Yeah, that culture that they've built of service. And so we've built everything around a culture of service and an obsession around 4 seasons level service, because we think that is what everything will have to move towards, right? And so, we used even the example of early on of, like, what is the Apple Store, right? There are some downsides of it, but, like, that was a radical change of, like, I could walk in and I didn't have to know that you were in sales or you're in service or you're whatever. I just talked to someone, right? Like, and that's like the world's, one of the world's most profitable companies, depending on when you measure it. And, like, they're doing that. So, like, and they're doing it with largely a monopoly on the market, and you have no monopoly and a highly commoditized market, and you're delivering a crappy experience. Like, what? Like, how would you?
So a lot of lessons in there for students, right?
Yeah. Like, how could you? They have a monopoly, right? Like, and so, like, you have no defensibility or no moat, and so there's no way that you can exist without that level of trust and that level of service.
So, before we kind of turn over to questions to the audience, a couple last questions. Mm-hmm. We talked briefly about the center being a former library. Mm-hmm. You have a unique office kind of feature. You want to talk
a library?
About?
Yeah, it's kind of a library.
Yeah.
So we're like, from the beginning, like I said, I'm obsessed, addicted with learning. So that became a core part of our culture. And so, like, and along with that, like, one of our principles is around humility. Right, and battling our egos, which we all have egos, and so, like, that's an easy thing to say, but it's a daily battle for all of us, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about that. Part of that, learning that humility, is, again, going back to, like, not wanting to invent everything ourselves. Mm-hmm. Instead, we say we want to innovate. We rarely invent, we mostly innovate. Why? Not because we don't have good ideas, but because we want to build on the patterns that people already know and understand, instead of forcing them through some wild new pattern because we want it to be. Because
teaching them.
Yeah. And so because of that, one of our things that we lean into is reading, learning from others, and not making lots of mistakes, but trying not to make all of the mistakes on our own, right? And so, like, pain is mostly how I've learned over the years, and so, like, I'm tired of pain, and so I want to learn off someone else's other mistakes. So we built this culture around reading, around learning. That became a podcast called Seeking Wisdom, where we talk about learning. Not only, a little bit has to do with professional, but it's about learning in every dimension, right? Like, in our lives, like, not only professional, like, we are whole people, and so, like, if we become better in any one of the dimensions, we think we become better at what we do professionally. And so we have a crazy, everyone in the company can order as many books as they want. Every room is named after different authors that we like. Every room that you walk into is filled with books, and if you ever walk into our office, take as many books as you want and as much swag. And so it feels like a library, and most of our walls are adorned with different authors and different people that we admire. But what it's done, and the reason that we did it, is first that humility, but also that we wanted everyone that we brought into the company to be obsessed with their own personal progression. And so that's one of the main things and so they want to learn. And then we want to build the entire organization to be a learning machine, and we want every person to be their own personal learning machine. And so we think if we can do that, then every individual will pull the company as a result of their own personal progression, versus the flip side, we will have to push everyone in the company towards the goals that we want. So we want to create this, like, pull effect where the company is drafted by everyone in the company.
So on that note, I have one question. I'm going to steal it from a member of our audience who asked a really great question earlier this week. We were with some of the executives from HubSpot.
Sure.
And Lindsay.
Who was that?
So we had Katie Burke and Allison Elworthy. So Allison's a Tuck alum.
Sure.
And they come up and teach in a course taught by our faculty director. So we were having lunch, and so Lindsay asked a really great question, right? Which is, for MBAs, like, where are some of the maybe I'll just actually ask Lindsay, since she has a mouthful.
Yeah.
That's the perfect timing to ask.
Yeah.
I think my question was really centered around where are the skill gaps that you see with MBAs or just people our age, but specifically MBAs. What when you come out of school, what skills or qualities do you wish that
You
we
had?
that we didn't learn?
Yeah.
In
That's
these
a great question.
2 years?
Yeah, I like the skill gaps. I think it's a whole bunch of them. So let's go. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, sir.
2 for 2 on that one, Lindsay.
Yeah. No, I spend, I'm like an EIR at another school in Cambridge, which we won't talk about. So I spend a lot of time with the MBAs there and talking about this very question. I'd say first I would say that it's been interesting to watch that, my first half of my career, like, it used to be like all these product managers would leave to get their MBA because they didn't want to be product managers anymore. And now it's like flipped. Like now I talk to a lot of MBAs and they want to be product managers. I'm like, oh, this is like flipped, right? Because the world is flipped. But like, it's interesting. I think I'm first learning the appreciation of having MBAs in companies. And I learned a little bit of that at HubSpot during my time there. But right now we recruit heavily at Drift because we're in a different phase. We didn't at all. Will Collins, who's a Tuck alum, joined us kind of when we were like 20 people or less, maybe less than that, and as an experiment, and he turned out to be so great that now we have a lot of Wills.
Going back to that.
Yeah, that model. But really, as we start to scale now, and we're building systems, it's great. We are trying to only hire, in some ways, MBAs. But the skill gap that I see is more, is that a lot of people who have come in do not have a lot of experience in this context. And so like I will compare it to, from an engineering and design standpoint, we recruit a lot from, and I did in the past too, from Northeastern School in Boston. And that's a school that's built around a co-op program. And so like those kids are insane, amazing, like some of the best. They outclass any other school that we come, because they come ready to work with lots of experience. And they, we'll have co-ops that are way better than people who are experienced engineers on the team, right? Because they just have been in the cycle so much.
Like experiential learning well at
and so the experiential learning part, I think, is the big hole that I see in MBAs. Like the ones that again in Cambridge, like, yeah, they intern a little bit in the summer with some companies and whatever, but they're bouncing around too much, and so they haven't spent enough time going deep in any one area. And the common thing in my sessions with them is around, it's almost always the same topic. They're trying to decide between joining a company, starting a company, taking this banking job, doing this thing. And I always say, like, the curse that you have is like you have too much optionality. Like this is like you have too many options. Like this is like the worst scenario, right? For you to be talking to me about like an early stage company, because you're in like a market that's like this. You're like in a school that gives you infinite options, and you're amongst other people who are just talking about their options. And so like you're like crazy about
a lot
like
of lessons we've shared as well here. Yeah.
It's like, should I do this? Or I'm gonna do a startup, and then I'll be a PM part-time, but then I'm gonna do this other banking thing. If that doesn't fall through, I'm gonna do VC. And it's just like, you have too many options.
You need to like such a deep backup plan.
They want backup plan, and it's like, look, you're gonna have to like at some point choose and just go in it and focus on what are you gonna learn from this thing. Prioritize learning is what I say. Like whether the company fails or not, or you succeed from a career standpoint in there, if the unit of measurement was, I wanna learn X, Y, Z, and I learned it, even though the company failed or like there was an option there, that was massive success, and then you can take that, and that is your optionality to go to the next thing. So I guess that long answer to your question is like, the experiential learning is the big part, and a lot of that is available to you, but you have too many options usually to want to focus and go through it.
Be intentional with kind of where you focus.
Absolutely, yeah. That's really hard.
That's super,
definitely. Maybe you guys are better up here than in Cambridge. No problem.
So, want to open it up to the audience for questions. What questions do you have? Wow, we got lots. All right, Mike, you're right in the end. We'll work our way over.
Thanks. So, speaking of Katie and Allison when they came up, and I was in the class topic, Professor Taylor. The case that we looked at for HubSpot was at that crucial moment of do they go horizontal or do they go vertical in their next step. So for Drift.
Yeah, that was painful. There was that took like 2 years of a lot of cursing, a lot of going back and forth.
So as you're thinking about the future horizon for Drift, where do you see the most opportunity? Is it going kind of vertical and looking and being this marketing sales bot tool and service provider for every enterprise, no matter what size? Or is it thinking about stretching vertically or horizontally and thinking about what other areas or business operations can intelligent bots fit in?
Yeah. I'll give you the answer that all logical people hate. Both. Is the answer. Is the answer to most questions in life is both, and every engineer at Drift that I tell that blows their mind, right? Like the answer always has to be one. It's kind of both, like what we really think about, what we have in the market today, Drift is just a little wedge solution. Like really what we're thinking, where we think we evolve is pretty different. Like our focus is not the marketing and sales or B2B software world. That's not the world that we see ourselves in. Because our focus on buying, like we see our world as even in the US, the 1.2 trillion in B2B commerce, right? Like that's our market. Like we have to figure out that market. And so like we have chosen to focus on revenue, and that's what puts us in marketing and demand gen and sales specifically. But all of our customers measure us on 3 things, like the number of meetings that we bring, the number of opportunities from on a dollar basis, and the pipeline that they close. And we've been in market for a very short time, but our customers have closed over $1.6 billion in revenue that has come through Drift, right? And we've influenced like $6.8 billion in revenue, and we're just getting started. So like we have to figure out how we get closer to the bottom of that. How do we get how does that become 100 billion, right? Like, and so that's the market that we think about. We think the way that the resegmentation happens is not around, again, software tools and software categories. It's really around the buying process. So we think what we're doing is really closer to, it's not e-commerce, but it's closer to a Shopify in the B2C sense or a Stripe in the B2C sense. Ours is a B2B sense, so it's a little bit more complicated and humans are involved sometimes and not always. So that's our world. I don't know if that gives you an answer, but we will verticalize and we'll do both and we'll do all that stuff. Yeah.
Heidi.
So I know Ghostery was like a free product and freemium. The HubSpot has like a freemium base, and Drift has some free testing options. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges of offering free to use or freemium products, especially when you're venture back?
Yep. So good question.
Ryan.
I think when I started Ghostery, it was just a side project, and so like I just made it free. I had never thought that it would. It was.
Made my life so much easier.
Oh, thanks. Oh, thanks.
I used to be in MarTech sales.
Oh yeah.
I used it every day.
Yeah. So I created it, and I thought like only I would care about it because it was so geeky, and then I only released it publicly because I had a friend in San Francisco who was equally as geeky, and then I woke up in whatever the first year, and there was like 3 million people using it, and now it's like, I don't know, 36 million or 40 million or something like that. But anyway, I never really thought about it from a monetization standpoint with that one. With HubSpot, it was an inside sales only product when I got there. It was an SEO tool when I got there, and then we built out the platform and did all that stuff, and then we layered on a freemium option much later, like towards the end, right? And end of my time there before we went public. And the reason was, again, in that second phase of SaaS, we were all trying to figure out the business models. We had an incredible inside sales lead gen model that we had built at HubSpot, but we were always looking at companies like our friends at Dropbox and Evernote and other companies on the West Coast and thinking like, oh, theirs is much better. Like theirs is like there's no salespeople and whatever. And so we would spend a lot of time going over there and meeting with those founders and those exec teams, and they would be asking us, how do you build a sales team? Like, how do you build that? Because they wanted to build a sales. And we were asking them, like, how do we do this freemium thing? And so, like, we built this freemium stuff with the CRM and other things at HubSpot. And from that standpoint, like, my learning was, like, it's hard to change your DNA. Our DNA was the sales-driven approach. And even though we had this freemium stuff and we wanted to move more product-centric, it was interesting, but the company was always going to be, unless you committed, like, company suicide, it was always going to be sales-driven approach, and this was going to be an add-on kind of thing, which is kind of interesting. At Drift, we chose to be intentional from the beginning and say like freemium is core to our offering. And we started only as a freemium business and then later added on sales. We were free only for the first year, freemium I should say only. And for us it made sense because we had a viral mechanism in our product, which was by definition every website that uses Drift says that it uses Drift, and therefore we can track, and from the very beginning until this day, like 30 to 40% of our signups come from other people's websites, right? And we can track where they come from. So we had an incentive in there where when we were trying to do it at HubSpot, it was good, but we didn't really have an incentive in there, and it was always going to be small versus this thing. And so for us, we have this incentive, and even if free people in our or people who pay us $50 a month or whatever use it, they still end up referring people who may be enterprise or mid-market commercial opportunities to us because that person had an interaction on that business's small business website. So it makes sense for us. So my learning from it is really like it has to be core part of your model. You have to build a flywheel around it. Otherwise, it's hard to justify it no matter how much you like it.
Was the referral a part of from the beginning that you were hoping that would really drive adoption?
We had,
or did that just exceed your expectations?
Both. It exceeded the expectations. We thought, we all had heard stories of like, oh, SurveyMonkey has these little links, and Hotmail, no one here is old enough to know Hotmail, maybe you.
Yeah.
Hotmail had, grew through these links powered by Hotmail. And it was like, let's just try it. Maybe we'll get something. We didn't know the magnitude, but we knew like we would get something from it. And so we saw right away like what was happening. And so therefore we invest heavily in that. We will invest even more heavily going forward.
So I think you have an interesting approach on marketing in general, both from your product as well as like your kind of touch on like marketing Drift itself as a brand. How do you see that? And I can see why it works really well with B2B. How do you see that translating kind of to more B2C focused marketing?
I don't think there's, my whole rant is there's no difference anymore. There's just people, right? Until the bots buy from the bots, which then maybe none of this will work, but it's still people. That's why in the beginning, I kind of skipped over this in my long rant, but like around our form of marketing, what we did was go back to not only old copywriting, but to understand, and what we teach internally is like social psychology and biases and why we make decisions the way that we do. And like when I speak to marketers, B2C and B2B marketers, which I speak to all the time, I ask them like how many people know about cognitive biases, how many people have read Influence, how many people have done this, XYZ. Usually 99% of the crowd has no idea what I'm talking about. And my point is that is all that marketing is. There's nothing else, right? They have been grown up in a world to think that the mechanism of buying an ad or doing a post or whatever, that's marketing. That's not marketing. That's just like a mechanism which we can automate that, right? That's not actual marketing. And so like the reason I say like there's no difference because people make decisions the way that they've always made decisions, and so you have to do that in B2C and B2B. And we never look at B2B models at Drift. Like if we see someone in B2B doing something, we'll almost like knee-jerk never do it. We look at more B2C stuff, and we look at different types of buying models. We study infomercials. You ever study infomercials? Like I'll go back. I don't know if you're too young for you might be too young for infomercials, yeah. But once you start to study social psychology, the way that we make buying decisions and the biases, like once you really start to study it, and then it's almost like you might be too young for the Matrix too, but like you might be like, okay. All right. So it's like the Matrix moment. Like you will be born. You will be in a new world, because all of a sudden you'll be looking at everything, and then you'll understand exactly what's happening and why. Like Charlie Munger calls it Lollapalooza effect, which is like a combination of biases. Like you'll understand why you're making decisions. I always use as a teaching tool, like the Amazon product detail page. Yep. Because it's perfectly designed, right? From a designer standpoint, they look at it and they always think it's ugly, and every designer who tries to build a checkout page actually removes all the parts that actually make that page effective and make this beautiful page that doesn't work. When you study it, you'll understand like how many triggers you're getting on this page, and that they have triggers that are for different buying types, right? People who are more action-oriented, people who are more social that makes more social-based decisions, and it is like the perfectly designed page, and maybe we'll do a course someday, I'll send it to you. You can see that, and so that is the same in B2B as in B2C, right? So that was probably more than you wanted to know. Okay.
So I'm just curious to know, how do you see the business models evolving, considering you said that the software is essentially getting commoditized, so that traditional licensing model may not work. So where do you see customers, what are they willing to pay for? Is it better service, better content?
Yep. So all of those, I think, for us specifically, the way our model is changing is, and we're exploring this, so it's not proven, is there's a part of Drift that we will be offering as just a service, and some of that will be human powered, and most of it will be software powered, some of it will be human powered, but companies will buy that as a utility. They don't actually care what the mix is. That's our problem. And so right now we only sell software. They have to provide some humans in that system, whether it's marketers or salespeople. We'll be moving more towards end-to-end for some of our customers, and that's what we're hearing from them. Like, that's what they want. They just want to buy it, and they just again want the outcome. Like I don't care like what the mix. Like, can't you figure out the mix? Basically, is what they're asking.
You're the
like,
expert, right?
Yeah, you're the expert, and like, can you teach? Can you also like teach us? Can we come to your office? Can we do training? Like that's all the stuff that they want, like, because they want this transformation.
Do you do that then?
We are starting to. We're in the beginnings of doing that. We're not doing that to the extent that we need to, and the market is like dying for. Our market is dying for that.
Right. So it seems like over the past couple of years, SMBs are starting to increase the number of SaaS products they use.
Yeah,
You
for
have
sure.
10,
Crazy.
15, 20 SaaS products, which leads to the rise of these like integration companies like Zapier.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how do you guys think about integrations and specifically like trying to be the center of it? Like every company wants to be the center of this ecosystem.
Yeah, the center of
Like,
the
how are you
center.
thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been amazing. Zapier has done a good job, Wade and those guys, and then MuleSoft and Zenless companies, Tray.io. So there's a lot of stuff happening there. The way we think about it is we're largely a point solution around on purpose because we want to scale from SMB or VSB to high enterprise, and so we did that on purpose, which means we have to rely on a lot of other partners and existing stacks, especially in enterprise where best of breed wins. And so we started the beginnings of building our ecosystem and our integrations there, and of course we do Zapier and Tray and MuleSoft, and we do all that kind of stuff. It's super important for us, but the way that we think about it strategically is that that's more kind of like exhaust data. Like if we look at the buying stack, like we think the CRM, if we're effective, it's quickly becoming storage, right? Like that is not the center of intelligence, that is a storage mechanism. Continue down that line, just like ERP. And there'll be a few users who use that thing, but like it's largely storage. And that we're getting in the middle of communication that's happening throughout the entire company and the customer across the entire life cycle. And we think the new layer of intelligence that we're trying to own is around that conversation data and what you can do with the conversation data, but also the coordination data that you have to build amongst that. That's the new premium of stuff, not this weird CRM stuff that we have in our world of that's human entered by salespeople who don't want to enter it in, and so they enter as little as possible, and then we build reporting on top of that. It's kind of nuts. Or event data that's piped in through one of the integrators that you're saying. It's not much interesting in that. If you log into a CRM, if you are a user, looking at thousands of events for someone or weird stuff that's entered in there is not that actually useful. But the actual words from the customer that we can capture, the sentiment of those words, the words from the people and the way that they're communicating, what they're expressing is really valuable. And so we think value will move up that stack.
Probably one more, last one. Yeah.
So you mentioned building a learning organization. And I think one of the things that's really characterized the companies like HubSpot, Drift is the willingness to push out, and ability to push out features and products on a monthly, quarterly basis really fast. You also mentioned that 99% of your problems are people problems. And so I'm wondering, how do you operationalize that such a fast development pace.
Yeah.
Especially, you know, how do you organize people in
Oh,
a
yeah.
way that maintains that?
Yeah,
And
I have
is
a
that-
book on that. It's called Hypergrowth.
You
Yeah,
should read it.
yeah. No, it's a great question. I mean, when I got to HubSpot, we didn't really have a product, and we hadn't shipped in probably a year, and so we built this mechanism. The thing that we did was to build the organization around learning, and we had to build in these what I call guardrails and constraints into the system to force learning to happen. One of them was speed, right? And speed does not matter, right? Like speed for speed's sake is useless. Speed for us is super important because it is a constraint that we put in the system because we want to have as many feedback loops as possible. So if we think of traditional software development and you say you release once a month, you have 12 feedback loops, right? Like, and so my thought was like, how do we have thousands of feedback loops? How do we have tens of thousands of feedback loops in a year, right? So like, and so how we could force that to happen with humans is like, we're gonna have this constraint that everyone has to ship every day. And every engineer was like, what are you, insane, crazy, this, that? Yes, all of those. But what that did by having that constraint, and even at Drift, we took it even further than I did at HubSpot, but like, you know, you have to ship on your first day. When someone comes in, every person in the company doesn't have a 30, 60, 90-day plan, they have a 1-7-30 plan, right? You're expected to do all of this first day, 7-day, 30, and then 30 days out. That's how, and it's public to everyone in the company and everyone understands how you're doing. What that does by having that weird constraint in is that it forces the organization to be able to enable that. So all of a sudden, all these things that you would normally have to worry about, like how do we ship things fast? How do we make sure that this shipping, our system is not broken, our testing system is not there? How do we make sure like someone can walk in off the street and in one day learn this fast enough to be able to ship? Like all these things that you actually want to happen, you can force to happen by having this weird constraint of like, we will ship every day, right? And so like it causes these things to happen. And so by causing this to happen, we also create the opposite end of it, which is like we also have to figure out how we learn from all of these things. And so for us, it's really prioritizing this idea of insights. And so like every team has to deliver insights. Every product team delivers insights. Like it's not enough to move data and data is moving up and to the right. That's good. But if you cannot provide an insight, which is a learning from it, that we learn something from it, then we're failing. And we view that as a kind of a failure mode of like, it doesn't matter what the metrics are. If we're failing on metrics or succeeding on metrics, if we have no learning from it, something is broken in the system, we stop that system outside of engineering as well, and we try to figure out how we learn from it. Because I think that's the only advantage that we will have. We'll have the customer experience and how we treat customers, and then we have this learning organization. It's kind of crazy.
I just want to follow up with
Yeah.
So as you're like, is there like pods of, you know?
Oh yeah,
engineers?
so you want to learn? Yeah, of course. So I started this kind of like pod thing originally at HubSpot, and then we've gotten it more so at Drift. This idea was like that we were going to have that I was going to force very small teams. And so at HubSpot, I did 3-person engineering teams, tech lead, 2 engineers, paired with a PM, a designer, and in that case, we had a product marketer that was embedded too. And the PMs, designers, and product marketers were a unit that worked across multiple of these engineering teams. Each 3-person engineering team owned an entire product. They didn't own a subsystem. I didn't believe in subsystems. I believed in everyone has to own a customer-facing product, which caused a lot of headaches, if you understand. Because everyone wants to be an infrastructure team, this, that. We had no infrastructure teams. We said everyone does top-to-bottom products. A top-to-bottom product could be a multi-billion-dollar category, right? It could be email. 3 people only own email. And so the feedback would be like, it's impossible. We can't build email with 3 people. Reduce the problem, reduce the scope. We're gonna only build email with 3 people. And so we forced this to happen. What ended up happening, and the reason that we wanted this was that we were able to have all of these teams, we would horizontally scale and make their own decisions. So decisions, when I was running product, were not coming from me. Like I didn't know my success was I didn't know what most teams were working on. I found out later what they were working on. I knew I was measuring all of them on customer metrics. I was measuring them all on a bunch of things that we were looking at and guardrails, and that the customer was getting happier. The key for the product team was, for each product team was, is revenue increasing for that team? Is churn decreasing for that team? How is that happening on different cohorted bases? How is that happening in different product lines? How's the experience for the customer measured on uptime, speed, et cetera, how are tickets that we have, issues that we have reducing month over month, week over week, our win-loss reasons where we're losing deals, are those getting reduced? And so I was looking at all these things for teams. I don't need to know like that you're working on a bug or a feature or what. I don't care. Like all I care about is like, and what you should care about is that the customer is getting happier over time for your product. That led to the velocity and that them making their own decisions. And so they hated it at first, my structure, but the goal was autonomy, right? The goal was autonomy. Once they had autonomy and they made their own decisions, the engineers, no one was telling them what to do, they loved it, right? But the flip side of autonomy is accountability, right? Which is in equal measures, we rode hard on accountability. And the only tension that we had was most people wanted autonomy with no accountability, which is anarchy, right? And so they want all the autonomy, no accountability, but that's just anarchy, that's not autonomy, right? So like autonomy and accountability was our pair.
Anarchy is a great way to stop,
Yeah.
to end the conversation. So we just want to thank you so much for coming up. I was talking to Will, and if folks are interested in Drift, Will's a great resource. If you can't find Will's contact information, let us know in the center. We can get it to you. And we just want to thank you so much. We actually do have a little something for you here.
Oh, thank you so much.
And
Thanks
all right, so join me. Thank you.